I always want to start with the beginning, the growing up. What was Zach like? What was life like? Start me, from the early years, lead me up to high school, college. After high school.
So I grew up on east side of Cleveland, little suburb called Eastlake. Whenever I tell anyone that in Central Ohio, they're like, "Oh, I've heard of Eastlake. That's really nice." I'm like, "No, that's Westlake." So there's always the Eastlake, Westlake, two very different areas. Eastlake's little town. We're about 15 miles east. It was a great place to grow up. So I grew up there with my parents, my sister. My dad was a school teacher and a football coach and a track coach. So I kind of had that upbringing, blue collar, hard work. You kind of, all the attributes that you're gonna expect from a stereotypical football coach. But grew up there, played football, ran track in high school, ended up coming to Ohio State in '99, and from Ohio State was an adventure. So I didn't know what I wanted to be from day one. There was lots of ups and downs, and then I'm sure we'll touch on some more of that later on. But coming to Columbus was the best thing I ever did. I met my wife once I came to Columbus, met her at Ohio State, and from there it just led me down the journey that kept me in Gehenna this day, years later.
Yeah, I'm laughing and smiling because I moved around a lot when I was growing up. No, I shouldn't say a lot. I went to 3 different schools. So I don't know if that's a lot. Probably a lot to some, probably not a lot to others. But it's funny because I get to learn as we go, right? When I'm bringing, other realtors on. And so when someone's like, "Oh, I'm from Northeast Ohio," and I'm like, "Oh, what part?" They're like, "Oh, Youngstown." I'm like, "Oh, I grew up in that area." And then, East, my high school years, I went to Madison.
Okay. I didn't
So
do that.
my high school years.
Rival.
Yeah, freshman year through senior year, I went to Madison, and so North and Perry and Menor and Chardon and all that good stuff. Willoughby South. So I was laughing because it's life works sometimes where it's just kind of a small world, right? And it's just like, now obviously our time frame's a little bit different as far as when you were there growing up versus me growing up, but I always laugh when people are like, it's that close distance, and they're always like Northeast Ohio or east of Cleveland or whatever. It's like, oh, what part?
Central Ohio, there's so many transplants in Central Ohio. With Ohio State here and with the economy and everything, so many people came here looking for that next opportunity, and we just stuck around.
Yeah. I mean, why go back, right? So you grew up playing sports, kind of active. Decided, after high school to come down to Ohio State. What did you end up coming to Ohio State for?
You know what? I originally wanted to be a teacher and a coach. My dad was a teacher and a coach. His dad was a teacher and a coach. I was like, what else am I going to do? I want to be a teacher and a coach. So I came to Ohio State, with that in mind. But, honestly, I wasn't the best student. Coming down here, you get that freedom. When you get started, you're like, I'm going to be fine. I'll figure this out. And then, one thing leads to another. And, I struggled my first, in college. I just struggled. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I bounced from major to major after that. And then with Ohio State at the time, really the only way to be a teacher was to go to grad school. Mm-hmm. And nobody was going to want me in their grad school at that time. So I ended up, there's lots of things that happen. So like I said, I struggled in college, right?
Yeah.
So it was hard. And that's one of the reasons, I'll kind of touch on it later on, I think. But, one of the reasons that led me where I'm at now and gave me a successful real estate career is so many failures, so many failures growing up and in college. In those failures that you go through, they build a foundation. You're like, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm not going to drop the ball like that again. And that's, in college, I was in school for almost 5 years, really didn't know what I was doing. And I got academically dismissed. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And, so that I went back home, went to Cleveland State for a semester. And, one thing led to another down here. I was still coming down here every so often. And, I ended up I ended up getting a girl pregnant down here, and she's now my wife. It all worked out, but like coming back down here and like, I had so much growing up to do, and eventually I did go back to Ohio State and graduate with a degree in psychology, and did really well in my major. So like there was that growing up process, but yeah, like bounced around. I didn't know what I was going to do in college, and it was just so many hiccups, but it all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, college is one of those things. I got my own views, my own opinions on how do you really have an 18, 19-year-old try to figure out what the hell they want to do for the rest of their life. And for me, my experience was moving from a small town south of Youngstown to Madison was a huge jump for me. Culture shock, all of those things. I went from 50 some kids in a class to 270, I think was my graduating class, and then I came down to Ohio State. And coming to that big city, was even more of a culture shock. And the same thing. My first semester was great with grades. Then they kind of went down, and they leveled out. But I think it's just so hard for someone to really just figure out at that age. And
you're so young, your life experiences are going to lead you to what you want to do career-wise. So unless you're dead set and that you want to be like, have that specialty, you want to be a teacher or an architect or a doctor or something like where the direct field in college. Otherwise, you're just kind of getting a degree and seeing what path you're going to take.